welcome. So Tamil nalla varuma ungalku?
Amma. Naan pesa muichi pandren.
Okay.
2-3 things excited.
But like Kamal sir kuda work பண்ணும்போது and especially when you are doing a film like Vishwaroopam.
Of course.
அந்த தமிழ் வந்து உங்களுக்கு கஷ்டமா இல்லையா ஆரம்பத்துல?
Tamil ramba kashtam, but I'm still trying, you know, to learn it. But obviously working with sir, he's very particular. We know because he's such a prolific writer and has known, you know, known for his poetry also. So I think he was convinced because I was able to handle the emotions and give sort of give a new take to maybe he hasn't seen this Brahminical girl being shown the way I did it. So I think he welcomed that sort of freshness, you know, to it, which I brought. I think that's the only reason why I stayed on, because it was not because of my Tamil, that is for sure. And I think, you know, he is particular about the language, which is why I memorized. And otherwise, I think most people, they have the phonak, so they listen, they hear it, and then they just say the dialogues, right? But that wasn't helping me. It was actually stopping me from emoting, because I'm listening to something and then understanding, and then I have to say it. So that I come from the school of, you know, where there's no dubbing. You know, everything is sync sound, coming from live plays and all of that. And then people are like, no, you can dub it. Oh, you can fix it in dubbing. I was like, what do you mean fix it in dubbing? But there's no choice like that, right? So you give it your all in the first take itself, because that's where it's going to last. So I was able to memorize, and then that's how I did the dialogues. But I remember the first day, I mean, I landed on Wednesday night, and Thursday night he gave me
very particular
5 pages of dialogues, like paragraphs. And I was like, oh man, Pooja, ab to tum gayi yahan se, like forget it, like just say namaskar, vanakkam, thank you very much, and get ready to pack your bags and leave. But luckily it worked out, so he was okay with it. But I had to memorize everyone else's dialogue.
Oh, okay.
So I'd memorize Andrea's, Rahul's, whatever scene we had, combination scene, and memorize everyone so that I could actually give the expression back, right? Because you can't just listen to the dialogue and be like, and then say your dialogue, and then you know, it doesn't work that way, because then you're not engaged in the scene. So and we only had 1 or 2 takes, right? Because we had 3 cameras, there's a bomb going off, there's this happening. I mean, there's so many elements at the same time that are happening. So you have to be, you know, right on for the dialogues. And I think you have to be particular, which he was, because it's a big production. There's a lot of things at stake. There's so many things planned for just 1 take. And so there's a lot of camera movements that he has in it. So we had to be, you know, right on with it. Otherwise, you'd be in big trouble.
But because you came from a background of sync sound, right?
Yes.
So I guess probably 1 take, Pooja.
Well, I mean, we're used to just doing it all in 1 or 2 times. You know, there is no option in America to do it like 14, 15, 16. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? They don't do it because they have everything sort of planned out, and they usually have 3 cameras operating at the same time. But our movies, I feel so bad. We don't have the budgets. We don't have enough manpower. We don't have enough people to operate the cameras to do that. So it's we're in a very difficult situation in India, whereas in America they have the options.
And within this confined space, you have someone like Mr. Kamal writing an international espionage thriller.
Amazing.
So how does that whole dynamic work out, right? Because it's not even set in India, to be very frank.
Yes.
It's set in America, and then you move to Afghanistan, and then it's back to America. So how did that whole dynamic play out with respect to you being that American girl? Were you able to identify more with respect to this story?
I think that's one of the reasons why he cast me, right? Was because I'm from America, I lived there, and that was one of the reasons. The second thing, you know, visually, we work in a visual medium. So you have to be convinced of the look of the person. So I think I had that look where it worked for Nirupama. And so the combination of those 2 things, I think, you know, helped. And plus we were shooting in Michigan, New York, London. So you wanted also someone obviously who could travel easily, and didn't, and that was, I was totally fine with that, because you go where the work is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, plus, I mean, you're working with Kamal sir, so it's not like you say anything. And he's got a great way of integrating, you know, international cinema. And I think he is obviously the only one, I think, in this country who's been able to take a regional language movie and take it international. I don't know any other filmmaker who's been able to do that. And that too in an authentic and interesting and entertaining way, right? It's easy, not easy. No film is easy. So I don't mean to say that to other filmmakers, but he's been able to do that. And I think, and have that fan base and those people to watch and to continue to watch him. And I also think, you know, he's done so many fight sequences, right? He's done some action movies, but with him, he does it in a new way every time. I mean, there's only so many ways you can set up a camera, right? There's only so many ways you can punch a guy in the face. But he does it so interestingly every time. I mean, he captures it from a different angle, or he, you know, gets a top angle, he gets so that's what makes him unique. And I think in thrillers, you have to bring those new things into it, because, you know, you've been doing movies for Kamal sir, he's been doing it for what, 50 years now. So how do you reinvent, or how do you still make it fresh, and still how do you make it interesting? Because there's so much talent out there, and there's so many interesting stories, and there's so many like aspects now to movie making. It's not just the big theatrical movie anymore. It's TV, iPhone, iPad, anywhere, you know, you can see it. So he's been able to adapt to what's happening, you know, with the new technology, which is also something which, you know, we have to respect about him and admire.
One thing that I noticed when you were talking about is that action sequence, right?
Yeah.
So that whole transformation sequence in Vishwaroopam original, you had the front row seat. Give us some input on how that entire sequence was filmed and how you were looking at the whole thing.
Look, that was authentic expression, because he didn't tell me he was setting up 3 cameras. He didn't tell me this is what's going to happen and this is what I'm going to do. I was basically concentrating on my character and my role, and he just said, look, this is the scene, and I get up and I, you know, transform. He just made it really casual. And then when he did that, I was genuinely in shock. And maybe he did that on purpose, right? So he could get the real expression. But I had no idea that he was going to, like, kick 10 guys' like butt in like 5 seconds. Like, I had no idea. And also he did it in such a way where, like, you're not thinking it's, you know, manufactured. You know, it's actually, he's actually beating these guys up, and he can do it. You know, like, you're not questioning it at all. And with like this little panache, and I think because he's a dancer, he can move, you know, really well. And that dancing gives you that classical background and that, you know, way to move around in the scene, or the way to choreograph a scene, or the way you can move even when you do action. It's like it's music. You know, there's a musicality to it that he does even in his action. And so that, I mean, that whole time I just couldn't believe it. And there were, obviously we had multiple takes, but the first one I would say is the most authentic, is what he kept in the movie, because the rest of them I'm like, oh, wow. And then, yeah. But I didn't know about it, and so that was good. No. And we shot that actually on film.
Oh, okay.
We shot that on film, and so that wasn't part of the other part of the movie we shot on red camera. But that one we shot on film, because I think he wanted to capture that film texture, you know, because that gives that clarity to it and the depth into the scene.
As a person who has been in this industry, like probably not in Tamil as much, but probably in the industry for like more than 20 years.
Yes.
You have produced your fair share of movies also.
Yeah.
How was it transition that you are seeing with respect to the technical side of the industry?
Well, look, technology is changing and it's emerging, and we have to move with that time. That's one. And the second thing, I think it's great because I feel like now we can make films on smaller budgets. We can capture moments, you know, that we couldn't capture before. You know, there's so many amazing moments in our real life. And that's what you'll see also, I think, in documentary filmmaking, which is taking a whole new stance right now, where we didn't think about documentaries before as interesting things to watch. But I think now people are really seeing authenticity.
Okay.
You know, they're seeing this sort of real life people going through these tough times and then coming out of it. And we see these sort of coming of age and emerging stories. And that has so much to do with technology.
Yes.
If we didn't have that, you know, we wouldn't be able to see those stories. And I think that's also changing our filmmaking. It's changing our acting. We're becoming more natural. Because you see the documentaries and you see these people, I mean, when you see these kids and they find their parents that they haven't had, or they're these adopted children and then they go find their real parents and you see like the real emotions, I mean, it's heartbreaking, you know, and so you want to recreate that in dramas, in scripted, in scripts that have already been scripted for you. So to recreate that, it is really tough because now we're kind of like spoiled by seeing real life emotions. But it's a great time. It's a great time for stories. It's a great time for women. It's a great time for content because we have distribution, so many different avenues of distribution, and that has to do with technology. And so it's great. I mean, we need to adapt to it, and I think more movie theaters in India will adapt more to the technology and have better sound. Because I think still in some of the interiors, the sound isn't that great. And I think if we get the sound great, you know, the whole point of going to the theater is like the big sound, and you like, you know, you hear the bombs go off, or you hear, you know, the hero go from one building to the other, and you hear his footsteps, and it comes right into your heart, you know. So all of these things, I think, come together. It's going to be great for filmmaking and new filmmakers too. You know, they're going to be able to practice.
Coming back to Nirupama, right? She is not dancer.
Yeah.
But Pooja Kumar is a dancer, and your husband is a dancer.
Correct.
So this is a very interesting dynamic that you are playing in. Now you also talked about how he integrated the dance and the action sequence.
Yeah. That's my interpretation. I mean, I don't know how it started, but I felt like because of his dancing background, that made the action. Yeah.
Do you think that might help you if you are choreographing, if he's choreographed an action sequence for you? Are you doing any action sequence in the Vishwaroopam too?
Well, I do underwater action.
Okay.
So that really didn't help with the dance. Didn't help with that. Because you're underwater. But I would say that dance gives you the flexibility and the mobility in your body, you know, makes you adapt, you know, to the different situations that you're asked to do. So you're able to kind of, you know, go with the flow and mold yourself because, you know, we're put in different situations and you never know. Like the one, you know, he'll say that this is how we're going to do the sequence, but then it doesn't turn out that way because maybe the electricity went out, or we don't have that location, or this truck didn't come. So he changes it and sort of improvises, right?
Okay.
And so you have to be able to improvise.
So there is a lot of improvisation on the sets of Vishwaroopam too.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, we've got to follow the script, and we have to follow, obviously, what he says. But as far as our character interpretation and bringing in the nuances, he's very open to that. Because I think he wants to see people who are engaged just as much as he is.
And what kind of nuances that you brought into Nirupama, the character?
You know, I didn't know a lot about the Brahmin women and in Tamil Nadu at all. So I asked Sir, actually, I got a lot of guidance from him on like, okay, this is how they would say it, you know, this is where you would take the pause, and this is how they, you know, how they would act. So I got a lot of guidance, you know, from him. He just basically said, you know, they're like really cute girls. They're cute and they're my family. And you know, that's how you have to think about it. I mean, he's like, you're this family girl who's selfish. So, and then he said, now you know, take it from there. So.
We were talking about the whole Nirupama Vishwanath of 2013 and now Nirupama Vishwanath of 2018. Yeah. What has changed for her?
She has a new, I would say, I would say admiration and respect for her husband, which she didn't have before. She sort of just interpreted this, you know, man to be this dancer who is gay but not gay. Maybe he has a couple of girlfriends, maybe he doesn't. So she just really didn't care, you know, and was very much about her and her priorities and where she wanted to go in life. basically she was a user, right? And just taking advantage of the situation. And then she transforms into this woman because she sees this man doing something for the country. He's sacrificing his life for the country, and it makes what she has been doing this whole time very trivial. She realizes that, my gosh, I mean, it's not just about us, but it's about the greater good of people, and that love conquers all. Before she didn't really think about love, and now suddenly she has these emotions which she never even thought that she had. And he brought those out in her.
And Vishwaroopam 2 is all about exploring all those emotional side of Nirupama.
Yes. And if I say any more, then I'll reveal a lot.
You were talking about the underwater sequence that you were shooting earlier. Can you tell a bit more about that?
So we shot the underwater sequences in Thailand, and it was a big Olympic pool, and we built a big ship set underneath the water. And it was like basically like from England. It was a ship in the 1930s, and we put it underneath underwater, and we would have to dive with the 3 other divers that I had, and go through cannons. We'd have to go through these old war doors, pull the war door open underneath water. I had never done any of this, and hold a gun, and breathe underwater with the oxygen tank, and have your mask, and there's too many things you have to do underwater. And then we had these special mics, because underwater you can't hear anything. It's all about seeing everything. So we would hear Sir say, action, cut.
And you were able to hear all those underwater?
We could hear, because we had these special mics.
Okay.
But that's all we could hear. You couldn't have conversations underwater. But yeah, we could just hear action and cut. And then he also didn't know that we could only be underwater for 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So whatever, we were taking long shots, wow, a 30-minute take is a long time. But they had cameras like the GoPros alongside us, so they could capture all the different things. So we would just say action, and then we'd just kind of go through, and then he would say repeat. So there wasn't really any time that he said cut, because we had to get up above the water after 30 minutes, because then your oxygen goes less, and then your nitrogen levels also go below your regular level, so you have to go up above water.
Is it the first time you actually did a sequence like that?
I've never filmed underwater.
Okay.
All of my diving experiences have been my personal, as a hobby. So, I've seen shark, and I've seen stingray, I've seen all kinds of coral that is stunning, and I can't even believe that it actually exists. But this is the first time where I'm actually doing action, underwater.
Coming back to Kamal sir, 2013 is Vishwaroopam 1, Vishwaroopam 2 is 2018. 5 years has been a long time for both him as well as for you.
Yeah.
So how do you see this change? What changes do you see in both yourself and in Kamal sir?
Well, as as observing Sir, I think, look, as an actor also. As an actor, I haven't seen any films after that of his, but I do see the difference in he's doing social service right now, whereas before he was a filmmaker. I would say he's just got this freshness about him. I feel like he's found a purpose, in his life, is what I've observed about him. And from part 1 to part 2, I would just say he's just refined the movie that he made in sort of a modern way. He's been able to combine the Western edginess to Tamil cinema and to Hindi cinema, which I think is very difficult to do because our movies are emotional based, because we're an emotional country, whereas American movies aren't very emotionally based because they just don't operate that way. That culture is not.
The bridge between both is served in Vishwaroopam.
I think so. I think he's been able to adapt that very well, and in an honest way, not just sort of putting it right in your face and just going off the cuff. He's done it in an authentic and truthful way.
You have said Kamal Hassan has been very helpful for you through this entire journey. So how do you see Kamal Hassan the actor, Kamal Hassan the director, Kamal Hassan the writer, and Kamal Hassan the person? How do you differentiate between all those four?
I don't differentiate between them because they're all one person. He's this extraordinary talent, that we should celebrate and that we should honor. because he truly is a unique voice in the international cinema and someone we should really look up to and try to emulate as much as we can. I mean, so I would tell you when we were shooting part 1, I was very nervous pretty much every day. Part 2, I got a little bit less nervous, but there's still that one factor of his which is very intimidating, which which requires excellence. And I think that's really important to keep, on the set, because you get a little comfortable, you get complacent, and then, you don't perform. And you don't want to be doing that as a performer. But he's the writer, the director, and the producer, and then he's my love interest. So I had to differentiate. I mean, I had to, while the camera was off, listen to him as the writer and the director. And then when we're on camera, take that interpretation and take those notes that he told me, and then play the character, and then play the love interest opposite. And it's hard, because he's that same person that's there and then that comes over here. And I'd never been in that situation before. Plus, we're shooting 2 movies at the same time, and there's a lot of moving, factors in the movie. So, it was tough. It was really tough. But I think I learned, so much, which I think will help me in the future.
Okay. Final couple of questions. Yeah. You are a graduate in the political science, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I'm just going by your wiki. So how much of an input you had in such a film? Because it also talks about the geopolitical nature of not just the country, but also the world as such. So how much of an input were you able to give to the whole story of Vishwaroopam?
I didn't give any input to the story. I mean, this is Sir's story. He wrote the screenplay. It was his subject. We had discussions about it because, my background is political science in America. I've studied, the government policies there. I've studied, how it works, how the governments work, and how the, House of, Representatives and the senators, and how in each state, what are the policies that can be implemented to help people. So that's kind of what I studied over there. I didn't study politics in India. In India, and I don't really know much about it. I'm getting to know it now, but I don't know it too much. I've never studied it. So we would have, discussions, while we're shooting and off the set about what's happening in America and what's happening in the world, and how South Asians are making such a big impact, on the world, and especially in America. I would say, Tamilians and all the people from Tamil Nadu, I would say the highest number of successful people in America, which is, we're talking about Indra Nooyi, we're talking about Ashok Amritraj, M. Night Shyamalan, A.R. Rahman. They're the highest ones, the highest amount of people are from Tamil Nadu. And I was like, we should be celebrating them, and we should be honoring and making it easy for people to come and be successful. And he was kind of surprised about that, right? That was, one group and one sect who've actually done really well in America. And this movie is really important because of what it says as far as a message to everyone. And that's, we've got to take, our life into our own hands. And we've really got to speak up about the things that are happening to us, the things that the government doesn't do for us. And I think this is one film that does that in an entertaining way, and also not in a preachy way. And so I really hope people go see it and watch it a couple of times, because I think the first time you watch it, it's a lot to take in. And then the second and third time, you'll actually understand what he is, trying to say and trying to say to everyone, actually.
So the final question is why should people root for Nirupama Vishwanath?
Why should they root?
Why should they root for Nirupama Vishwanath?
Oh, because they're sacrificing their life for the country. And I would also say that, when you're married, for like 10, 15 years, sometimes life gets a little boring, with the same person. So it gives, I think, inspiration to people and to couples that, like, you can revive your love, and you can go back to that.
With just a little bit of gun bombs and
just a little bit. Add a little bit of violence in your life and it'll make it better. No, that's not the message at all. But yeah, no, I think you stick together because love is the ultimate goal for everyone.
Thank you.